Welcome to another episode of United for a Healthy Stoughton. My name is Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator here for the town of Stoughton. And today I am privileged to have with me back in the studio, I guess this is the first time we've sat and done something like this, but back sort of in his old haunts, Jeffrey Pickette. And Jeffrey is at the Stoughton Public Schools. He's the media relations manager, right? Did I get that title right? And he's here today to talk about what he does for the district, and we're going to talk about positive messaging and all of those fun pieces. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Stephanie, and it's great. And when I was here at Stoughton Media Access, it was always a great honor to really work on your show and get that going.
We started that when you were here.
And so anyways, it's a full circle moment sort of to be back and a guest on the show.
Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah, you were the first producer. Like, the show wouldn't have happened without you, which is that is a fun piece of history, which does not count as your fun fact. I'm just going to say. So I would love to sort of start out like talking about sort of your career path and sort of how you ended up at Stoughton Public Schools and the role that you're in, and I'm going to ask you to share a fun fact about yourself. So you can either start with that or you can end with it.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Stoughton, went to the South Elementary School, the middle school, the high school, graduated from Stoughton High, and I felt a connection, to the community, but, I went off to college and I knew I wanted to do something journalism related, and I studied journalism at Brandeis in Waltham and graduated from there. And when I was looking for jobs coming out of college again, wanting to do something in the journalism field, I had worked while in college for a local newspaper in Canton, on the side, writing a few articles a week, and I really enjoyed that local journalism and just being able to tell people, like, your neighbors' stories, and things that wouldn't necessarily make it to the network news or even, your local news on like Channel 4 or 5 or something like that, but just the stories of the people that you live, you see in restaurants, you sit beside at sports games, those sorts of things. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So, and I had been the editor of the school newspaper at Stoughton High School, and, obviously had a connection here. And so I saw that the company Patch was just really getting started. It was owned by AOL at the time, and they were launching a bunch of different news sites across the country, and they were looking for local editors. And so I actually applied to be a Patch editor in a town that still doesn't even, never actually ended up getting one. But in my application said, I'm applying for this, I would be happy to get this, but I actually think that it would be really great to have one in Stoughton. And they agreed and ended up having one in Stoughton, and I ran the Stoughton Patch for a few years, then ended up coming here and working at Stoughton Media Access for a number of years, and that was great to shift from more of like a print and photo focus to video, obviously, and capturing things on television, and being able to get to know so many people again in the community, keep the same relationships that I had at Patch, but just build upon them in different ways, like what we talked about with the television show, and being able to do things like that. But when I was looking for like a next step in a career, I always came back to, like, whether it was at Patch or whether it was here at SMAC, I always enjoyed being able to tell like the story of what was going on like in the schools. And I felt that it was important to be able to share that message, because a lot of people don't necessarily know what goes in, in the schools on a day-to-day basis. They just, if you're a town meeting rep, maybe you just see like the bottom line figure on a budget, or there aren't as many newspapers anymore. Certainly 6 or 7 years ago today, virtually no local news coverage in that regard. And so if the school isn't telling its story, the story's not being told. And so I was looking at like next career steps, and I said, it's a growing field to have like a public relations or media relations like within a school or a municipality. And so I ended up working in Lowell as their media. It was a community outreach. Was the title there, but adapted the skills I had, like journalism-wise, to that role, and then the position here in Stoughton opened up, and it was a no-brainer to come back. And again, it's a place that I've lived most of my life and have a lot of connections to, and so I've been back in Stoughton since 2021, and it's been a great experience working for the schools, and again, being able to help tell the story to the community, in addition to a lot of other things. I manage the websites. There's a lot of that's a huge part of the job too, that kind of doesn't get as much visibility because it's a lot of behind the scenes work, but it's just been a pleasure to be able to work with a great group of people, both at central office and just district wide.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, so now fun fact about you that people don't know.
So I don't know if this is it's a fun fact. When I was at Stoughton High School, my senior year, they created the Mr. SHS competition.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's been going on for years. It actually just came back this year after like a hiatus for COVID. And I actually won the very first.
Oh, you were the first Mr.
SHS.
Oh,
yes.
that is a fun fact.
Now, there used to be a plaque in the old high school auditorium. I think it was the class of 2012 as its class gift. Either 11 or 12, I forget which. It was the class around that time. Gave as its class gift a plaque listing all of the Mr. SHS winners. And I'm like, that's really cool. I don't think it made it over to the new high school. So
it's got to. I bet it's in a box somewhere. I mean, maybe it's not hanging. It had to have made it.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't have gone down with the building.
But hopefully they put a new one up.
Right.
But anyways, no, that was a fun. I've won many more important awards, but I've always just
That's a good one though.
I've taken pride in that because it was totally outside my wheelhouse, and really was a lot more reserved, especially back then. So to do something that outgoing and it just that was a fun night.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is a good fun fact.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Cool. So let's talk about like a typical day, week. Like, what is it like to be in your job? And so you talked a little bit about some of the things some of the things we see all the time on social media, and some of the things that are more sort of behind the scenes. So like, what might be a typical work day for you?
So really, and this isn't like a way to sidestep the question, there isn't really like a typical work day.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much based on what's going on around the district. So depending on the time of year, there could be a lot of events going on, and it's a lot, events driven, and there's a lot of photography and editing involved after the fact, and things like that. And sometimes it's more meeting driven and planning and trying to strategically think, and then sometimes it's a little bit of both. And so that's what I kind of like, is that there's always something different going on, and you try to give each school its share of coverage and events. And sometimes it's hard, like can't literally be multiple places at once, but just try to do a balance so that you're not constantly at one school and not the other. But so a typical day could be there's an event going on in the morning, and maybe there's a classroom activity and happening at another school later in the day. In between that, back at the office, and maybe if there's not a meeting, doing some editing there or website work. And then at night there's probably an athletics event going on, or fine arts, or something like that. So, or could be a meeting, a school committee, building committee, something of that sort. So it's always something, keep me on my toes, keep me busy. So.
And then there's the web, so you manage a lot of the web stuff too, so keeping all of that stuff current, which I imagine is massive undertaking for a district of our size. Yeah,
and it's especially towards like the beginning of the school year, just making sure that today before coming over, just making sure the school calendar for next year is all up to date, ready to go. So because that's, even though we just started summer vacation.
Yep,
If you're
people are
watching
already
live,
thinking.
people are already
Yep.
thinking of September. So
Yep.
just things like that.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the district newsletters, I imagine that
Yep.
falls under your purview too. So those have been coming out weekly,
Weekly.
right?
So that's a great thing that our superintendent, Dr. Baeta, this year started a weekly newsletter, and it's just a really great way to reach out to the community. And just, again, another way we could tell our story, because if you're following us on social media, you might see a lot of the same things in the newsletter. But if you're not, or if you just happen to miss a few things, it's like a great just way to encapsulate what we're doing and give you like just a nice overview. And it's I love SMORE. That's the platform that we use.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools across like the country use it, and in fact some of our schools too use it for their own newsletter. It's a great platform that looks really neat and clean and
easy to put stuff in.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, and I know you guys have been able to share some of the things that we have going on in the Oasis Coalition that are in partnership with the district or that are important for families, and that's been huge. Like, because I know that's the way a lot of families get information. Like, for us, it's great.
And I think that's important too. And it's certainly, not to speak for anybody, but I know it's a point of view or philosophy that Dr. Baeta has too, is that making sure that like we're part of the community,
right?
And we want to be part of the community, and we want to work with people in the community and make sure that like we're good neighbors, and and so that's and so when you're running an event in partnership with us, of course, like it's a no-brainer to
to put those things
it.
together. Yep. So you were talking a little bit about like sort of the philosophy of like sharing the story, and can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that's like an important sort of driving feature of like why these positions exist, right?
Right. So again, like we want to put faces to like our success, and to show that we're doing a lot of great things, and that a school is not just a bunch of line items in a budget or a test score, or and I'm not trying to downplay like data that you can go look at, niche or even the DESE website, like any of it, that's all important too. But like there's stories to tell beyond just those numbers.
Right.
And so I think that that's really important, again, especially where there's just not local media the way that there used to be.
Right.
To be able to share that and let people know that this is like, we're doing great work every single day. And some of my favorite things to show are like collaborations that take place, between like various grades or even various schools, like getting together and doing things that you just wouldn't think about necessarily. But like it's great that like the middle school, for instance, had a handful of times this year the National Junior Honor Society members walked over to the Wilkins school and met with third graders there, and they had like a buddy, like a third grade buddy, and would work and do like math activities with them, and like that's really cool to showcase something like that. Because that's you wouldn't normally think of that.
Right.
But anyways, that's just my philosophy, is just to be able to paint a picture of all the great things that we're doing, and I want people to be able to see the success. And sometimes there's things that aren't so great, and it's important to be upfront about that as well.
Right.
And frame it in a way that that like you'll have confidence in us in the way that we're handling something. There's been a situation that some of the schools that might pop up, but we're handling it. And we're working well with our town agencies that might also be responding to something as well. So it's just to keep people informed. Like that's the most important thing, is you don't want somebody not knowing what's going on.
Right. Well, and we talked about, I know Mr. Colantonio and I have had this conversation before too, about like if you don't share all the positive stuff and there's sort of just an absence of any information, people sometimes fill in that gap with their own stories that might not be accurate.
Right.
or only sort of hear about the times where there's a situation that's maybe not so positive. And if that's the only information out there, it feels like those things are more common or bigger than they are because we're missing everything else that's going on.
Exactly, and it certainly can taint a perception of, or even if you just hear again stories on the news, which they can really only focus on more negative things, that this trend on TikTok, and you just get this idea that teenagers are just across the board, not causing havoc in the schools. No, it's not the case.
Right.
And we have hundreds and hundreds of just fantastic young students who are doing wonderful things and achieving great things in and out of the classroom, whether it's music, athletics, academics, volunteer work, community service. And that's my job, is to make sure that people know about that.
Yeah, which is awesome. Which is awesome. It's so funny. I was talking on our podcast actually earlier this week, I think, about that idea about like the perception that people have about teenagers. And my colleague and sort of one of my professional mentors, Dr. Jeff Linkenbach, talks about this thing he refers to as cultural cataracts. And he wrote this article like years ago about, as adults, we have these cultural cataracts where we see teenagers through this lens of like, they're all doing risky things, and that part of life is really like just dark and negative, and it's like kind of our job to just help them survive these dark teenage years. And those are the stories that we often see like in television shows, and it's perpetuated in sort of all of this media all the time. But in reality, like that's sort of rare behavior. Like, yes, kids like risk. I mean, there is something developmental about that, but most kids are making really good decisions most of the time, and we just don't. That's not the picture we paint. It's not how we talk about teenagers often. And so that does them a disservice. And I was actually talking to a high school student about it, and and they were talking about how they have to. Part of sometimes their world is they have to navigate this like idea that adults have this perception of who they are that is not who they are, and that they're doing in fact all the things you just said.
Right. And actually to kind of tie it into something that the schools do with Oasis is the youth survey. And again, that's something that comes up every year, is the people's perception of the risky behaviors is always a lot higher than the actual amount of people doing the risky behaviors.
Correct. Yes. We all carry those misperceptions, and so to be able to talk about the truth about what's happening is really protective and important, and it's like such a key part of that narrative. And yet, not a lot of places are doing that. So it's awesome that the district does that. And I think the other thing it makes me think about is this idea that sometimes you'll drive by those fields and there'll be a sign there that says like, on this site in 1825 nothing happened, but it's kind of like, that's probably untrue. Like people were living their lives and they were just doing normal things, and they were caring for each other, and they were maybe they were farming the land. And it's like the same thing in the schools. It's like I mean, even my own kid, like she comes home from school, I'm like, what happened today? Nothing. And it's like, okay, that's so untrue. Like you were learning things, you were making friends, you were participating in all sorts of interesting things. Like maybe nothing, I don't know, that would be sort of newsworthy in a negative way.
That
happened,
actually could kind of play into it too. Maybe parents on our social media page and says, "Oh, that's what they did in school today."
Exactly. Oh, I saw a picture of you. Yeah, it wasn't nothing. Look at all these cool things that are happening in the district. Yeah, I think that's it's just a really important part of that story for people to hear. But I also appreciate, I think, the idea that when stuff does happen, that when things that are of concern are happening, that you're able to sort of like calmly, clearly be able to share like good factual information for people, so that they can feel confident that things are happening, and that they I think people often talk about that idea about transparency, and
because if there's a void, like you were saying before, if there's a void of that, people fill in the void, especially now on social media. And that's the thing, a lot of talk, social media is bad. There's a lot of bad that happens on social media. There's a lot of negativity and a lot of misinformation that gets very easily spread. But I don't think it's bad. I feel that there's a lot of good and positive that can come out of it.
Yep.
And so it's just to make sure that keep doing what you're doing and trying to spread the something that's rooted in fact and realistic, and showing like this is what actually happens.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The true story. And
Right.
And I think, like, we talk a lot about, like, we balance hope and concern, and sometimes the concern stuff happens. We have to talk about it.
Yep.
We have to be, clear. But most of the time, like, it's the good stuff.
Right.
And we sometimes we just think, like, well, it's nothing. And, and I think, like, it was the same in one of those conversations I had with Mr. Colantonio back when he was principal at OMS. He would talk about, he would just roam the halls looking for all of those amazing, opportunities and moments that kids were having all the time that were so positive, and being ready to take pictures and share those and showcase those, because that really is what's happening in the halls of our school most of the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that, and even just some of the work that gets hung up outside the classroom. Like I oftentimes will just stop and just look at it, and read what the students are writing, and it's great to see. And again, you don't get to go inside the four walls of the school, so trying to bring a taste of that.
Right. Or even I think for kids to be able to see, like, a picture of themselves, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you think about, like, when we were younger and there were more local papers, like, periodically it's like your picture might be in the paper or something. Well, it's so exciting.
That's also validating too, if especially it's like you have a lot of hard work, to see that it's getting recognition too.
Yep.
Is, I think, important.
Right. Well, I imagine also for those teachers who are who are being creative day after day, and they're doing some of these really cool, like, classroom activities, or they're thinking outside the box, and they're collaborating with other schools or with community partners that, I think people forget a lot of times, like, how much thought and work goes into making those things happen.
Exactly. And it's great to be able to show that, like you were saying, I think it helps and maybe, like, invigorate somebody to, that was really, like, worth doing.
Let's do more of that.
Let's do more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's that's a really important piece for all of us, is to think about, like, how do we grow all that good stuff. It's so good for students. And I've been doing a lot of research around, like, positive childhood experiences, and so I think that idea of, like, kids getting recognized for things, and everything that happens in those moments that we think of as, like, small moments, but they're really, like, how kids build relationship, how they connect with caring adults, how they figure out, like, this social emotional stuff. Like we were talking about, like, if you watch kids on the playground and it's unstructured, especially little kids, and it's like a mess to watch. Like, they're trying to figure out, like, that's not the rule of this game, and they're kind of, like, grappling through it, but it's so important. And it can look from, like, the outside, like, oh my God, like, what is, but it's, like, healthy, and it's what they need to do, and they're learning, and they're figuring out how to be with other kids, and how to, like, manage rules and expectations, and how to be kind, and how to help. And
what I love is a lot of our elementary schools, they'll have, like, a monthly
words.
Character, like, that a positive character trait that they're focusing on. And so it might be compassion, it might be integrity, it might be honesty, and they all, you put them together, it really makes, like, a model citizen. And they'll honor the students that displayed that sense of, or that character trait, and to see the students' reactions when they get that, they're so excited and fulfilled, and it's great to see. And again, it's not based on who's getting a on a test, or 100, or whatever the scale is. It's based on behavior.
Yeah, so finding other ways to recognize kids' talents, because they're not all going to be, like, A students, or athletes, or any of the things, but they can be kind, and stuff that we really want for them when
Right,
they become adults,
and
right?
you see students of all abilities
Yep.
and ages, and up there, and that's always great to see. Again, how excited they are.
Right,
Yeah.
right, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So I have one last sort of more fun question. I mean, not
Yes.
that these questions haven't been fun because it's been really
I
positive.
can't believe it's already.
I know, right? And you're used to this,
Still, I'm
how
like, how could you
fast it
fill a
goes.
half hour with me? But,
Easily. So what are like the best things about your job, or maybe like a couple of moments that you were like, oh, I'm so glad I got to be there and witness that, or take pictures of that and write about it?
Oh, that's a great question. I enjoy any time that like somebody like those award ceremonies I talked about, where you just see like pure excitement and joy, and love being able to show things that happen in the classroom.
Yep.
But I also, over the years, like I've tried to put together some things like that I do every year. Like I always like to showcase the like the top 10 graduates from the high school class. Again, like everybody knows who like 1 and 2 are because they speak at graduation or class night. But like I think that's a really big deal to go through 4 years of high school and to achieve at that level. Just making sure that like you get your due. And so it's like every year, do a photo shoot with them, and I like that. I like going to the athletic events and the fine arts concerts. I'm just amazed at how talented our students are. And what's really cool in my position is that like I'll, especially now, like I'll go to an elementary concert, like I'll see a 4th grade concert, but then maybe like later that night or the next week, I'll see like the high school concert. And it's like, or even just like the middle school, like 6th and 7th grade, to see like the growth that
that's
takes
cool.
place like in 8 years. Like you go from people like, kids who are learning to play like hot cross buns to students that are playing like complex pieces, and same thing with like our athletics, to see growth there. Like I really enjoy seeing like our students perform. I think that's great. And anytime you could see like a student that's just excited and like happy to be there, that's a joy.
That's
to
awesome.
Be able to portray that.
One of my favorite things that you do that was recent is like when the high school seniors go back to their elementary schools, and then
love that day.
And the pictures of them with their teachers and the younger kids, and then the one at the Hanson with the former principal.
Yes, Faye Palilio always comes back and she dances with the students, and that is always something, like that's the highlight of like
that's so fun.
That's
that
such a great
happens.
event. I love that we do that, and this year we actually incorporated the middle school too for the first time.
Cool.
And so before the seniors dispersed to all the elementary schools, they actually started by doing a loop around the middle school, and that was nice to
that's really neat.
to do that too.
And they probably, some of them might have siblings there, and that's really pretty cool. Awesome. Yay. All right. Ooh, look at this. We are like right on time for the end of the episode. Thank you for coming and doing this with me.
Thank you for having me.
It's
always great to
It was a privilege
chat.
to have you in studio in the chair, which is so fun. And I'm sure we'll be doing lots of fun projects going forward, because we have a lot of good news to share with people. So.
All right, well, and I'm always happy to come on.
All right,
so
awesome.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Well, thank you.